Ta-da!
G'day, mates.
Oh,
Sorry.
Hey, Rob.
You're fried. You're not paying attention.
Making notes. So that was good. Hey, Suze, my favorite Bruss. How you doing, Suze?
How are you going?
Oh, living the dream. Any chance I get to look at sunny Quinola in the background there, I'll take it. I grew up daydreaming about, the South Pacific. The one thing about Australia that does concern me are the size of your bugs.
Yeah, they are pretty big. There was my podcasting gear was in this basket over there the other day, and I hadn't pulled it out for ages because I was taking it over to Mario's, and I was digging through it, and I pulled all the shit out of it, and I looked down on myself, and there's a spider on me like this. It's about as big as my hand, and I went like that, and I went over, and it kind of ran over under the little grey couch behind me here. And Susie's photography bag was unzipped and open, like the flap was open. And she said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Comes out, and I said, "Just watch out." And she unzipped the bag, and it jumped out. It was like an aliens. It was like an aliens movie. It's like.
Look, Mark, there you are. I hear you.
Okay. There I am, man. I mean, I'm looking like usually. I'm just like, I don't know. It's camera or something. Hopefully, not be that.
Yeah, you look like you lost like 30 pounds since the last time I.
Yeah, like.
Camera, so. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, after that, now you know why every time Rob Bruss talks, I go out and buy another 20 gallons of fresh water.
Another box of toilet paper that you're so famous for in your garage.
Yeah, Rob doesn't know this, but I actually interviewed his psychoanalyst yesterday, and she spilled the beans. She told me that Rob often wakes up in the middle of the night saying, space, cyber, sabotage, EMP.
You're missing the next ones. Air, sea, land.
Okay, so today is an actual panel discussion. This will be the first panel discussion I've done in an awful long time, and we're going to be talking about the war in Ukraine, the economics of war, and probably a lot more interesting stuff. This is going to be a lot of fun, so please hang around. So let's get started. This is the Hey Ed YouTube channel, and I am your host, moderator, and all-around nice guy, Edward Anderson. Today, I'm going to be doing a little roundtable, or panel discussion, in other words, with two really impressive gentlemen, and I really hope you stick around for this. If you do what I do with them, every time I think these two do a video, I turn off my cell phone, I get my cup of coffee, and I settle in for a half hour to an hour to just listen to them talk. And sometimes I'll watch it twice. So if ever you get a chance to listen to these gentlemen talk, you should take it. I will make sure to have a link. You should click on that link, subscribe to the channel, and watch their videos. All right, so I'm going to introduce my guests separately here. The first gentleman, the viewers to my channel will recognize. The female viewership of my channel always goes up when this man is on my channel, so I'm always appreciative when he's here. And he was voted by Australian Magazine as the man most likely to punch Vladimir Putin in the nose. Rob Bruss, ladies and gentlemen, from Cronulla, Australia. G'day, mate.
G'day, Ed. Thanks very much, mate. That's a warm introduction. I appreciate that. You may not know, before I let you go any further, it's a little bit of a funny story. Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister of Australia, it was during the G20 summit a couple of years ago when he was the PM, was quite a while ago. It was when MH13 was shot down, and Tony Abbott came out and said, "I'm going to shirt front Vladimir Putin when he gets here. I'm going to figure out exactly what's going on there." And everyone's like, "Shirt front? What does that mean? Like, what sort of Aussie slang is that?" If I saw Vladimir Putin, I'd throat punch him. So I'll make it really clear for everybody.
Okay, Vladimir, consider yourself warned. Okay, next time you're in Cronulla, get an extra couple of bodyguards. All right. Okay, and our next gentleman is a man I've been very excited to meet. I've been watching him along with Rob for months now, doing their videos together, and I've been fascinated with his story, and I've been really eager to meet Mario. This is the first time I've had a chance to meet him in person, and he's got a fascinating background, and I don't want to mess it up too much, but I don't know whether it's fair to say that he's a recovering communist, but I'll let him kind of set it straight. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mario Bex. Hello, Mario. Welcome to the Hey Ed channel, and great to meet you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I'd like to say thank you to all of your viewers and listeners. And thank you for this opportunity. Today, I'm truly honored, you know what I mean? And without Rob, without you, I will not be here today. So I'd like to say thank you very much for having me on your show. And Reform Communist, yeah, sort of this one. Yeah, it's a little bit complex story, but it is, yes.
Well, on that topic, could you, because you do have a fascinating background, could you give people like a thumbnail, what was your background in general and how you ended up in Australia? I never really got that exact story. What boat did you get on to get to Australia?
Look, I didn't know nothing about Australia as a kid. I grew up in Yugoslavia, ex-Yugoslavia, as all of you know. I witnessed as a little kid, the communism, but nothing better. So communism for me was like go to Rob in Cronulla and having it surfing. That was for me, as you're growing up, you're realizing there's a life beyond horizon, which somehow you can't see it because the government doesn't want you to see it. In my misfortune, I have a fortune that at age 14 on Christmas Eve 1986, my little Crimea River story is actually, my parents kicked me out because I was in juvenile before that. I stabbed a man twice with a screwdriver, and I was a little bit young, a little bit stupid and a little bit naive. And anyway, I ended up on the street. My grandfather picked me up. My grandfather was second in charge of the communist secret police, but he was a counterintelligence branch for the Tito while Tito was alive. And somehow he was on an exit leg, from that system. And it's what he did to me. He says to me, I'm going to send you military school. And I said, you can't send me military school. I have no grades. He said, don't you worry. So my grandfather sent me military school. Obviously, he put his name forward and everything else as a communist. And in return, I need to become they call the young proletarians, which basically have the summer school every summer. Everybody's on holidays and enjoying the recess, whatever you want to call. I will attend during the summer the reformatory young proletarian school, right? And at that stage, I already been in military school, applying for military school. And the first summer, I was already being involved with the people around my grandfather they were, what's it called? What's Robert Ward? They were grooming me for becoming the intelligence officer in military. So you have the military, but military has a military intelligence branch, but they have the branch outside of the branch, so it's just who is spying to spies. And 91, as we all know, Croatia would decide to declare independence. And I wake up one day morning, it was a summer day, and my parents left, and I went into war to fight for democracy for Croatia. I stayed in combat for 91 to 95, and then I was transferred to the State Security Intelligence Services and military. And somehow life, always say be careful what you wish for. So I want to be the spy, like literally 007, and you can't, because that's a creme de la creme job for for the different type of people. And somehow eventuated 97 that I was being approached in a coffee shop, like in the movies, and given an envelope. And a week later, I was in what's it called, Directorate 7. That stage was called Directorate 7, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Croatia. After certain educational and tertiary attending some schools they sent me, I was being en route to Australia. And I said to my boss, why Australia? You don't know how far away that it is. And then he told me, you're going to meet a Rob in Edward one day. No, jokes aside, jokes aside, I was being sent here because I was dealing with the radical right wing of the Croatian community. And I was being good. I was a young patriot and everything else. So 98, November 18th, 98, I was on a plane to Australia, and I was positioned as a head of my branch in Canberra and Australia. And that's it. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So.
Okay, excellent.
So yeah,
I got to ask. Did you have a trench coat? Do you have a trench coat?
Look, I'm embarrassed to say, but I showed Robert the other day. Rob, what was it called? Medvedev, right? I had a leather coat. Yes, I showed Robert. Rob says to me, Jesus, look like a Medvedev. I was like, yeah, that was, yeah, I had the letter coat, yes.
Excellent.
It just doesn't have an
Excellent.
umbrella. Yeah.
No.
And he'll tell you how to make the umbrella and the thing that goes in the end of it.
Someday when we're off camera, I want some really good stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, my part was to come today to you guys, I was like in hindsight again, I like to say thank you, Edward, again. And today I'm here thanks to Rob, and I'm in podcasting waters again because this man, third one on my screen is below, Rob Brass.
Yeah,
he gave me opportunity to learn. So thank you again for being your guest.
No, you're welcome. Now you've actually you're a published author as well. You've written a couple books, and I know your newest one is newly out. Do you happen to have it handy, or do you want to share the title of the book to the audience?
Yeah, I'll share the title of the book, and I'll be happy to send you. First of all, again, I need to say thank you, Rob, for the nice forward. So the latest book is called "What is the True Price of Freedom," which is a trilogy of my books. First one was called Bloodsoaked Soul, which is behind me, which talks about my not about war as I spoke about war from my personal point of view, not like the combats only and the dyings and killings and like everybody loves to talk about this, but more emotionally attached to the war, because when you're 18 years old, when I'm seeing my son is now it's going to be 20 in February next year. When I see my son, Rob will agree with me when he sees kids. I can't believe it how young and naive and green I was. You know what I mean? I went in the war. So like I wrote the books so people can understand the war is not a joke. Rob and I, as you can hear, Rob often says, war is hell, hell is war. So that's the latest book. That's 2 books, in about me. Like, Netflix is gonna pick it up one day and gonna watch Edward Anderson channel. And but the previous books I wrote, it's workplace investigations, crime investigations, informants and whistleblower management, identity, and competitive business intelligence. So it's in relation to what I do right now. I'm embarrassed now. Just like that's enough about me.
Look, when they decide to make a movie out of your book, I want first crack. I want first crack at playing you as a young man. So just see you.
Thank you. Look, it's like we all go through that process. Edward, we all once upon a time we were 18 years old.
Yeah,
and I'm glad that I'm sitting amongst the finest, you and Rob, so you can understand what it is. So the book's about this, and I'm happy to send you copies. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting. I went to Amazon as soon as I heard about it a couple of weeks ago. I went to Amazon. I know it's not. They don't have it yet. But I've got it. I let them know I want it when it comes in. So
thank you.
So thank you for that. All right. So first question I have for you guys is the latest news. Now I'm recording this. What is it? November 16. So yesterday there was news that some S-300 Russian-made missiles landed in Poland. A couple of them landed in some Polish farm field, killed a couple of people, and. There's a minute there when people will start throwing around Article 5. Now since then things settled down. They say, oh, wait a minute, these missiles only have a maximum range of 95 miles, and it landed in Poland. It probably didn't come from Russia, and they did some math. But there is always that possibility that this war could expand. We have U.S. boots now on the ground over there as inspectors, which is I guess they didn't want to use the word advisors like they did back in the Vietnam War. We better think of a different name because so we'll just call them inspectors instead. But the point is, we now have American troops on not just American, military equipment now have actual personnel. So I want to get your take on this missile development yesterday. Rob, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Look, at no stage did I ever think that NATO was going to do anything about that, because even in a surface-to-surface capability, the S-300 doesn't have the limitation or the capability to actually get there for the range limitation that you're talking about. But it's actually happened before, and no one's talking about that. Those missiles landed in Moldova, which is even further away than Poland. And they don't know if that was Russian stuff or it was Ukrainian stuff. Nobody's making a claim about that. But the thing that kind of irks me about it as well, and these discussions are so unbelievably important. And I would encourage viewers and listeners of this show to make sure that you're finding the news sources that you think are reliable for yourself. And Mario and I have got a course coming up in and around how to spot disinformation and misinformation. And what you have to understand is that the media has a narrative that they want to perpetuate. So when you're asking me about what it is that I think about it, as soon as I saw that happen on my Telegram channels, a couple of hours later, I'm seeing in mainstream media, so the CNNs, the CNBCs, the ABCs, mainstream media, all calling for Article 5. All calling for all right, let's shut down the airspace inside of Ukraine and let's launch the Air Force, let's launch the jets, let's get going with this thing once and for all. Come on. And what they're doing is they're getting ahead and trying to create the narrative. And what it does is it shows you how fake news actually is. So there's absolutely no doubt that those missiles landed in Poland and those 2 people died. Let's acknowledge that for a second. That's terrible and sad. But as soon as that happens, that's pushed to one side as if it's completely irrelevant. But that is the story, that those people passed away. That is an absolute and total tragedy. And it's unnecessary. It shouldn't be happening. And if there wasn't a war, that never would have happened. And those families will be devastated now forever, and they will never recover from that. I don't care what anybody says. You never get over the death of a loved one, particularly a murder. It's not an accident, and it's not deliberate. It's murder. That's what's actually happened. Whichever side it's come from, it doesn't matter. It's the same as shooting down MH17. That was an act of murder and terrorism. It's unbelievable. The thing that irks me about it is mainstream media picks it up and they're trying to drive the whole world to a narrative to take us to the brink of nuclear war. And these people will do anything to maintain power. They will do anything, including taking us up to the precipice to look over the abyss, to look over the edge into a nuclear apocalypse, and they will perpetuate it. And if you and I came out on YouTube, came out on mainstream platforms, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and we said that that was a Russian missile, we would have been cancelled because there is no evidence of it and there's no proof that it's a Russian missile. And now the Pentagon comes out and says, no, it's not Russian. They couldn't have done that. It must be a Ukrainian one. So you just got to be so careful at these narratives because the people in charge are not the ones you think. Joe Biden is just a puppet. It's like Weekend at Bernie's, man. Somebody's behind that guy driving him. See him trip over and he tripped up the steps in Bali and Joko Widodo caught him, man, lucky Joko was there. Joko caught him. He was going to go face first into something there, and all he had to do was to climb up 2 stairs. So my view is that we don't know that this is Russian. We don't know that this is Ukrainian, but we're not out there saying it was Russian or Ukrainian. And this has happened before, but nobody's talking about it. But mainstream media is getting ahead to try and take us to the very edge of the abyss. And I think that that's crazy.
Can I just add, sorry, Edward.
Please, no, go.
I concur with everything Rob says, and even I'm upset now because he took the words out of my mouth, as we'll say, right?
You go first on the next one.
No, that's okay. Because as you know, we all, live in different time zones, right? And every war is, a crucial war. Every war starts in its sunrise. And the thing is, yesterday was, as Rob says, the first news, Russian missile. Open source intelligence. People are comparing the debris of the rockets with the Russians, this and that. I couldn't understand what's happening on. 7 hours later, Joe Biden on the Bali says, no, I don't think it's very unlikely they're Russians. Now, in that time frame, could occur, as Rob says, Article 5. And what journalists don't understand, I want to bring this to everybody's attention so they can grasp this one. When you start war with Russia, nothing anymore is safe. Nothing. There's no distance safe. Rob knows. Rob, what did you say? The air, the sea, yeah. They're going to be obliteration.
Space, cyber, sabotage, EMP.
Yeah. And they're already doing those things. And so, I think myself, what are you guys doing? You want to provoke third world war? I mean, are you insane? In a split second, people wake up in the morning. It's bomb. But today, I'm reading different news across Europe because I have the different access to the news and speak different language as well. So I read it today. They say, doesn't matter. It's a Ukrainian air defense. It's their missile, but it's a Russian fault because the Russians bombing Ukraine and Ukrainians have the right to defend themselves. And I'm like, duh. Anyway, that was my 2 cents, right? So, and the Russians calculated on this. You can agree, disagree with me, Rob. We can talk later with you about this one. But if you think the Russians didn't calculate it, they will hit close to Polish border, and Ukrainian Air Force gonna miss for a couple kilometers, they knew it was gonna happen. Well, again, I'm the land animal. I don't know nothing about Air Force, so.
Yeah. Rob doesn't know this, but I actually interviewed his psychoanalyst yesterday, and she spilled the beans. She told me that Rob often wakes up in the middle of the night saying, space, cyber, sabotage, EMP.
You're missing the next ones. Air, sea, land.
Yeah. So I want you guys to know that I do watch your videos, and I do pay attention, and that's Rob. But Rob, it's worth having you mention it in this video. Describe what we're talking about there.
Yeah, so it's the Russian way of war. It's the Russian doctrine, and it's the way that every country in the world has an order of battle, and the Russian order of battle against us, because we have such a heavy reliance on space-based assets. If you can take those space-based assets off the table, you will blind us. We'll have no eyes and ears, and essentially, when there's no eyes, ears, or an ability to coordinate a strike via internal navigation systems, old school INS, and not GPS, they'll have an even playing field, because the Russians have the GLONASS satellite system. And even though it's not that accurate, and it's definitely not as accurate as GPS, we still have an equal playing field when it comes to those things. So the Russian doctrine and the Russian way of war is first order of battle is space. Massive attacks in space where they've got anti-satellite missiles. They can take our satellites out of space. They know exactly where everything is. We all know where everything is. And it's been something that has been written, and it's kind of, I guess it's an unwritten rule that what we're not going to do is we're not going to attack each other's space-based assets, and we're not going to weaponize space either. But we know that the Iranians, the North Koreans, the Chinese, and probably the Russians as well have weaponized space. And there's this funny little spaceship that flies around planet Earth from the Americans as well, which is probably a really super scary EMP weapon. And no one knows what that is. You see that little thing that looks like a space shuttle that lands every now and then. It only came back the other day. What is that? How many of those things are up there? Like, what's actually really going on? We were not supposed to weaponize space. So the Russians know, I think it's something like, don't quote me here, something like 1,300 satellites that we have in orbit on our side. And they know that if they can switch off a percentage of those, and they can do that pretty effectively with missiles from the ground, they know how to do that. They've got that capability. It blinds us eyes and ears. But the Russian way of war is all four of those things at once. So they'll attack us in space, massive cyber attacks. And we've had massive cyber attacks here in Australia in the last couple of months. Enormous. Some of the biggest cyber attacks of all. And that's something I want to talk about on a podcast later today with you, Mario, because it's been everything from our banking system to our governments to Bunnings warehouse, which is like Home Depot.
National sport, Australians are hacking it. So it's
unbelievable. And the businesses that get hacked then promote the people that are there and give them millions of dollars in bonuses. It's just there's something wrong with this world. And what it shows me is what you see with your eyes and what you hear with your ears is not really what's going on behind the scenes. All of this is just like a facade. This is the Matrix. I swear we are in the freaking Matrix. And it takes you have to be Neo or take a pill or something to get through all of this craziness. So it's space, cyber, sabotage, and EMP. So there's been massive sabotage attacks that have happened on your home soil there in the United States. And there's been coordinated attacks against electrical substations several times. And those electrical substations that were attacked, the authorities came out and goes, no, it's just vandals. But then they hand it over to some SF guys and say to them, how would you attack a substation? What would you do? And they come back with the plans. They overlay the plans and look at what happened. And it's exactly what happened. So twice the Americans have been attacked by sabotage. And who is that? Is that the Iranians? Is that Hezbollah? Is that the people from Yemen? Who is that? Is it Russians? Who knows? What we do know is that it's a very, very soft and easy target to attack. And we're seeing that at scale play out in Ukraine. We're seeing massive space, massive cyber. We're seeing huge amounts of sabotage with destruction of the electrical and water infrastructure. Now it's estimated more than half of it's been destroyed permanently. And there's no way to actually fix it. And they're not going after the power stations. This is something that's not been reported in mainstream media. But when you pull back the curtain, you pull back the veil, and you look at the pictures that you see through the hundreds of Telegram groups, the attacks are happening at these electrical substations. And what they're doing is they're taking out the high voltage transformers. There's only two places in the world you can get a high voltage transformer. And one is from South Korea and one is from Germany. And they don't just have high voltage transformers sitting on the shelf that you can bring across. Once the high voltage transformer is gone, that substation is out of action for at least the next 2 to 3 years. And it's predicted by all of the EMP commissions there in the United States, and I can give you some reference documents, that if the power goes off in the US through a mass EMP strike, which is pretty much what's happening in slow time in Ukraine, 9 out of 10 people will die in the first 12 months. Now, there's plenty of places on planet Earth where there's no power and not 9 out of 10 people die. But we have such a heavy reliance on modern technology, and none of us have the ability to grow our own food, to raise our own livestock, to feed ourselves. Where does food come from? From the shops up the street. So when we see these massive space, cyber, and sabotage attacks going there, the next level of escalation for the Russians is a massive EMP strike. And Mario and I have been saying that what we believe is actually happening is the Russians are pulling back from the front line to actually prepare for a massive, overwhelming strike, which will force the Ukrainians to capitulate. And it could be an EMP. And what is the trigger for Article 5? Actually, everyone talks about Article 5 on CNN, on NBC, and everything like that. But Jens Stoltenberg came out a while ago when someone asked him, what's the trigger for Article 5? Good question. Finally, someone doing some journalism. He goes, we're never telling you that. So no one knows what Article 5 is. But here we are with space cyber sabotage, and we're on the precipice with CNN, NBC, and all of this mainstream media is taking us to the edge of the abyss for a nuclear strike. And it's not a ground burst like a Terminator movie. It's in the atmosphere where it doesn't even have any fallout, but it switches everything off and destroys our way of life.
Well, a cynical person might suggest that that's one of the reasons why they have American boots on the ground now. Is in a way they're kind of hoping that maybe they accidentally get killed by some, and that's their Article 5 excuse. So a cynical person might say that. So I've got a. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, after that, now you know why every time Rob Bruss talks, I go out and buy another 20 gallons of fresh water.
Another box of toilet paper that you're so famous for in your garage.
Can I just add something, Edward, before we continue? One thing what the Western society forgets, and Rob and I quite often talk about this one, and I'm talking from my personal experience. People on the West don't understand, and they're underestimating the Russia. Russia was a role model for the many countries in the Eastern Bloc. One of them is Yugoslavia, and we had something was called compulsory education in self-defense of the country, not self-defense karate or kung fu, but it was the territorial defense of the country. So the age 13 in primary school, you already get introduction into making the homemade bombs, Molotov cocktails, how to use the carbine. 7.9 then was M48 was called, it's German and M98. But anyway, 7.9 caliber. But another thing it is with the Russia people making the big mistake. Rob, he said this, and Edward, you'll agree with me. We are all depending on our digital devices, right? And they all can be fried and everything else. When the people make it fun of the Russian technology, I don't take it this lightly, because I say they always prepare themselves for the EMP. I will use my analog technology, as Rob and I have the phone, because when everything is fried, I'm gonna use my old US truck. I have the Lada car, and it spends more oil and petrol than traveling kilometers. So what I'm trying to say, every time when we talk about this one, Edward, about EMPs and the digital technology and everything else, Russians continuously throwing analog technology because they're calculating on possible, and that Rob and you Edward, saw some of your videos, the howitzers they're using, the cannons, all this technology, 50s and 60s. What do you think? It's just coincidence? So that's my 5 cents. So.
Well, I mentioned in one of my videos on this topic that, okay, this might sound weird, but listen, the Russian people are, famous for living lives for struggling, right? They grew up with hardships. A hardship is a very good friend of the average Russian. They know what it's like to grow up in hard times. We in the West, by comparison, we're pretty soft. Okay, so it's much easier to disrupt our lives than it would be for a typical Russian. I don't know. That's just one man's theory. So I want to ask kind of a weird little question. But it's one of the little weird little questions that Ed Anderson gets when he's out for a long walk. Okay, now I'm talking to you as a guy who's never been in the military. Okay, and you guys are both veterans, and you guys have both been in shooting wars. Especially you, Mario. You had many years actually sleeping in the mud and the rain, and having bullets shooting right at you. So my question is, when I was growing up as a kid playing Army in the neighborhood, that was always, back then, it was okay to play Army as a kid. And now I thought, boy, if I were out in a war, I'd rather be in a tank than outside because I'm protected with all this. But now I'm thinking with all this modern, weapon systems out there, I think the last place I'd want to be is in a tank or anywhere near a tank. One of the weird questions. So tanks versus infantry. Any?
Look, personally, I can just start on this one. Rob has experience in Air Force and all these things, and I saw the tanks, and I've been driven in tanks a few times, and that's after the war. During the war, we were like in Ukraine, we were actively searching for I show Rob some weapons like it's RPGs, 50s and 60s weapons, and we used to be chasing the armored personnel vehicles and the tanks to destroy them. I do remember that I felt sorry every time when I saw on TV the crew being burned in a tank, and I will choose. I don't know what Rob's gonna say. I'll choose being infantryman anytime on a field. Doesn't matter. It is the hardship. It's different, because infantryman doesn't sleep in a hotel. He sleeps on a field, in the ditches, under the tent, and the rain, the snow, and all these things. And it's hell. I say it's hell. I don't wish this to nobody. So I know what the people going in Ukraine, both sides, Russians and the Ukrainians. But if you ask me, I'll be infantryman anytime. Anytime. Rob, what are you gonna say?
Look, I'd concur with you that I have to. If I had to choose, would I want to be an armored guy, or would I want to be, would I want to be a cav guy, or would I want to be a ground pounder? And I'd say ground pounder anytime, because you can get down and you can kind of protect yourself. It's less vulnerable. So I think you're quite right here. But there's one big thing that you're missing. And when you look at these things in isolation, which is what you're seeing, because every second video you see on YouTube or Telegram or some other platform that you're looking at is a Western NLAW, a Javelin, a Cornet, or some sort of missile taking out these tanks. But what you're not seeing is the Russian version of that. There's a little bit of it, but not very much. There's not Russians on the other side taking out our armored vehicles. And we've got a lot of armored vehicles on the Western side as well. And the reason that is not a factor, and the Russians, by the way, have got plenty of anti-armor weapons. They've got an incredible helicopter force, which has just been made and rendered completely irrelevant. And the reason the Russians are irrelevant on that side with their armor, with their helicopters and their infantry, is because they don't have a combined arms capability. So we have, and Western and NATO doctrine is combined arms, where we have infantry, armor, helicopters, and engineers all moving forward together as a collective. And that's why the Ukrainians appear to be so successful against overwhelming superior numbers and firepower. And that's because we've got the ability to use combined arms. They're trained in the ability of combined arms, and infantry do not go forward without the support of armor, and armor doesn't go forward without the support of artillery and mortars, and that doesn't go forward with air cover, whether that's helicopter or fast air. None of that happens in isolation. But what we're seeing, and what mainstream media would have you think, is that the Russians are completely useless with their armor, and they are, but that's because they don't have a combined arms capability. If they did, they would have taken Kyiv in 3 days, like all of the generals predicted, because they had so much firepower and so many numbers and such overwhelming force. The generals must look at that and think, well, if I had all of those assets, this is how I would do it. But unfortunately, they drove across the border from Belarus, and they got stuck there for 4 days, 5 days, or whatever it was, because they ran out of fuel. They didn't have logistics. They didn't have a combined arms capability. And then when they did the helicopter airborne assaults into Hostomel and they tried to jump paratroopers into there, they got carved up because, again, you don't do that without combined arms. Infantry don't move up by themselves. Armor should never move up by themselves without cover from infantry or cover from artillery or mortars in the rear. So, our tanks, I think part of your question is armor irrelevant? There was another question floating around saying, are helicopters now irrelevant on the battlefield? Because so many Russian helicopters have been destroyed, and that's the Ka-52 Alligators, the Mi-24 Hinds, the Mi-35 Hinds. The advanced version of those have been plinked off the battlefield, and plenty of unarmed Mi-8s and Mi-17s have been destroyed as well. Are they irrelevant? No, they're not. They're just not employed properly. Those Ka-52s are some of the most formidable machines out there, and they're so heavily armed and they're loaded to the gills with technology. And the pilots are actually really good. They have a high level of training, but what they don't have is a high level of coordination with a JTAC on the ground calling them in. They don't have fast air covering them above. They don't have drones over there showing them where they should be and how to avoid the manpads that are on the ground and all of those things. So I don't think tanks are irrelevant any more than helicopters are irrelevant. I think what is irrelevant is the Russian way of war, which is the same as World War II tactics that they're using today. And that's why they're losing on the front line.
Yeah, but they're evolving, Rob. They're evolving, Sorry, but just to add my 2 cents. I agree with Rob with everything what he said, but I truly believe from very first day, Rob and I discussed this. I believe that both sides, West and East, they are challenging and they learning from each other, the capabilities, the weapons, technologies, and everything else. Russians have the opportunity to see how the Ukrainian force is being deployed. We always take it out of equation that Ukrainians have the intelligence in real time. The Western satellites and, the equipment and everything else, the radars, they give them in real time. And I will not lie now and say Russians are only, losing. I think they're evolving, they're adjusting, and they're going to improvise their tactics because it's the very first time they have their large-scale operations, as Rob says. They what did you say, Rob? Combined arms. It doesn't work, But I think they're evolving, and they will show the full strength later on. That's all.
Rob, have you told Suze yet? Suze is his wife, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Have you told Suze yet that you booked your Christmas vacation in Kherson, Ukraine?
It was actually in Kharkiv, more towards Donbass,
okay.
more towards the front. She's right behind me laughing.
Okay. Hi, Suze. I love Suze.
She says hi, Ed.
Okay, yeah, there she is. Okay, look, there's so much more that I want to cover, but I want to respect your guys' time. We're coming up on our 45 minutes here, and I promised these gentlemen that I would respect their time. But this just shows you, ladies and gentlemen, there's so much to this topic. And these two gentlemen on their podcast, in their videos, cover these subjects in minutia. And it's fascinating. It truly is. You might think it's a dry subject or a boring subject, but it really is not. And I think that if you take the time to click on Rob's channel, and again, I'll link it in the description, you're going to be hooked. I know that when I get an alert for those videos, I try to be the first one to watch it. And whenever there's two people who watch it ahead of me, I'm disappointed that I wasn't the first. I try to be the first one to watch it, and I watch it all the way through. And sometimes I watch it twice all the way through. It's really, really good stuff. It's very educational. And if you think the subject matter around Ukraine and everything, it's more than just about weapon systems and strategy. This is a big topic that everyone needs to bone up on. You really need to aware, because it's already affecting us. Already, look at Europe. Look at the energy crisis going on. A lot of people are going to freeze this year because of this event. And we're in, if I have my math right, we're in day number 265 of the war. And there are also economic ramifications in this that's already started. Gosh, I wish we had time to cover that topic, guys. But I want to give a special thanks to Mario Bex and Rob Bruss for taking time out to be on the Hey Yeah YouTube channel. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here.
Thanks,
Thank
Ed. I
you.
really appreciate your support, man, and happy to come back and discuss this topic anytime you want. Maybe we can do something a little bit more regular, have a regular Tuesday slot or something like that. I don't know what works for you. Let's talk about that off camera and figure out what works, because happy to share that as well and inform your audience about what we're seeing. One thing I would share with the audience before we go is just a word of caution and a word of warning as well, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole that you end up going down, and it's doom and gloom. Don't spend all of your time and don't spend hours every day looking at this war, because it's awful and it's absolutely horrendous. If I showed you the Telegram channels that I looked at and the destruction and what's really going on, you would just turn away straight away. I think it's important just to get a soundbite of it on a daily basis and just have an eye on what's going on, but don't give it all of your attention, because it will drag you down. And war is the most negative energy in all of humanity, and death and destruction like that is just horrendous. You can't be around that all the time. You get a bit desensitized to it after a while, but I would advise a little bit of caution there and find some news sources that work for you. Hopefully it's me and Mario, because we've got no agenda to perpetuate at all, and we'd love to see you over there on the channel. You can just come on over to YouTube at Rob Bruss Official, and you can find that, and I'm sure Ed will link that down in the description. And don't forget, Mario's got a channel as well, Mario Bex, on YouTube. Just look for that and you can see that too. Thanks, Ed.
Excellent. 10 more seconds, people. Okay, that was very well said, Rob. My personal concern is the opposite, that people are not spending any attention on this. And so I do want them to get up to speed a little bit, because this is such an important issue that most people just live their daily lives and don't really, think about this. But this is an important situation. Okay, that's it for now. Edward Anderson, thank you to Rob Bruss from Cronulla, Australia, and Mario Bex from the Greater Sydney area. Somewhere over there, he's pretty secretive, so we never know.
It's a secret location. When you come, we got
next time out, hopefully we'll see the trench coat. Wouldn't that be so cool?
Yes, that's great.
Okay. So Ed Anderson from the Hey Ed YouTube channel, signing out.
Copy that.